Well, good evening. I've been traveling around the country, talking and talking. My voice is going and going. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to talk to you. So what I'm going to tell you first is something about my life. And the reason I'm going to tell you about my life is that you'll see how my life led to what I have become. 1,000 years ago, I was born. No, I really liked it. Actually, I don't remember being born. I don't remember my family. But apparently, my mom died when I was a baby, and I was given away. I don't know why they gave me away. I must have been an adorable kid. I just, why would they give me away? Anyway, so my family was from West Virginia, 10 miles from the plantation that we were on during slavery. I was given to a family in Harlem, New York. I didn't know the woman. I didn't know the man. They were very, very poor people. And what they did was to give a baby a home. So there I am. I'm the adorable baby. And they gave me a home. And I was so what happens, the man that, the critics, always critics. The man that raised me was a janitor. He worked as a janitor. He was a hard-working man, but he could not read or write. The woman, his wife, had about maybe a second or third grade education. She did not read much. She did not have good speech. And she worked in a factory. When she worked out of the house, when she didn't work out of the house, she sometimes she cleaned apartments for people, other people. And sometimes when she was home for long stretches of the time, she would sit down with me and read to me. Now, here was a woman who had no education to speak of, but she shared what she had with me. She had no idea that she was giving me anything or that she was influencing my life, because her background was not such that you would say, okay, here was a woman that had this sort of gift. But she would read to me maybe 3 days a week. And what she would read is primarily true romance magazines. I didn't. Okay. I didn't have a clue to what was going on in these magazines. I had no clue. I would stand in front of a mirror and try to get my bosom to heave. I would look into my eyes. No sparks went off. But I did like one thing. I was being read to by Mama. Mama was reading to me. I got to sit on her lap. My sisters, my stepsisters, said, "Oh, you're around Mama so much, why don't you marry Mama?" That sounded like a good idea, marry Mama. And so my life sort of went on, and it was uneventful until I reached the age in which I went to school for the first time. When I went to school for the first time, I had something the other kids did not have. I could read. The Mama's finger went across that page. My eyes went across that page, following Mama's fingers, and eventually I began to recognize the words. This woman had no idea what she was giving me. She had no idea how that was going to affect my life. I had no idea. And so I went on to be who I became to be, a street kid. I liked playing in the streets. My main ambition was to be either a basketball player or a baseball player or a football player. New York had a hockey team, the New York Rangers, and I used to follow the New York Rangers religiously until I found out that they were skating on ice. Skating on ice? What's that about? You know? All right, so basketball became my big sport. I loved playing basketball. My school career went okay, nothing great, because I was a busy kid. I was a busy kid in school. Today, I think they would have given me 4 or 5 initials, you know, ADDH, HRDC, you know, and a pill every morning, you know. I'm sure they would have, you know. So I always had something to say, and if the teacher didn't call upon me, I couldn't hold it in, you know. So I went to school. This is back in the time when you had to go stand in front of a classroom and read. So one time in the 4th grade, Mrs. Parker, I had to stand in front of the class and read. Now, I had one small handicap. I could not speak clearly. So I went to speech therapy for 10 years. They tested my hearing. Why can't this kid speak clearly? To me, I thought I was speaking clear enough for me because I understood everything I was saying. You know? And finally, but if you laughed at me, or I thought you laughed at me, I'd hit you. That's how I reacted. I would put the book down, come to your desk, and hit you. You know. This was apparently not acceptable. And so finally, sometimes I would throw my book at a kid. You're laughing, you're smiling, book goes flying across. The teacher said, you can no longer read in front of the class from a book. So what you had to do was to read from a single page. We didn't have single pages. So I had to copy out stuff. She said, you can make up stuff if you want to. Okay. I liked poems because when you read poems, the rhythm of the poetry, if you have difficulty speaking, helps you to get through it. So I began to write poems. When I reached the 5th grade, I wrote a very famous poem. You've all heard this poem, I'm sure. It was published in the school magazine. You all know the poem. I know a lady, I'll recite it to you for if there's anybody too young to remember it. I know a lady, oh so fair, to me she gives such loving care. I love that lady like no other, because that lady, I told you, I knew it, you knew it, right? I knew that, you knew the poem. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. My first time to Kalamazoo. So I began writing poems, and I liked writing the poems. I began writing stories. It was okay. I wasn't in love with it. It was not a passion, but it was something that I could do. I could do it. Eventually, I decided, looking around the world, that there were no advantages in being black. No advantages. All my father's relatives who were black were either janitors or they worked on trucks. There's no advantage in being black at all. It's all the famous people, all the people who were doing anything were white. I didn't figure out how I could become white, but I knew I did not want to be black anymore. And so I decided to be, like a lot of young black men, an intellectual. I'll be an intellectual, which is better than black, not white, but it's something I can do. Which worked for about 2 years until I discovered that there was no way my parents could send me to college. No way, no way, no way. They were having a hard time supporting me in high school. So with my 15-year-old brain, I decided to drop out of high school. I dropped out of high school. I got caught after a few months, put back into high school, and then dropped out at 16 and joined the Army on my 17th birthday. This is my great beginning. I sort of bumped along in the Army, learning how to kill people, which was not that useful once I got out. And I knocked around in various factory jobs. I was a cable twister. Cables would be manufactured, and they would come to me, and if they were misaligned, I had to realign them, twist them, into alignment. I worked as a destruction worker, tearing down buildings. I wasn't a happy camper. But I remembered a teacher in high school who liked my writing. And what she said to me, because she knew I was going to drop out, she knew it. She says, whatever you do, continue writing. And so I went back to the writing, not to make money, not to make a living or even help, but because it made me feel better about myself than tearing down buildings. It made me feel better about myself. Okay, so now that's my background. I'm going to jump forward a whole bunch of years. Now I'm an old guy. I'm looking around, trying to figure out how I got to where I am today. How did I get here? And I asked my wife, who's a regular wife, she's been hanging around for the last 40 years or so. How did I get here? What happened? Because my background did not sound like it was going to go anyplace for a long time. And she said, well, I guess it's because you met me. I said, no, it's not because of me. You're lucky. You're talented. Nah. So I began to break down my day's activities. What do I do special? So now I'm going to tell you what I do 6 days a week. It's a nice job. You can take notes. This is a nice job. I get up every morning at 4:30, between 4:30 and 5. And I come downstairs and I feed my wife's ugly cat. No. My wife has this cat that's really ugly and mouthy. Feed the cat, and then I begin my day's work. And my day's work is I write 5 pages a day. Sometimes 6? No. Sometimes 4? No. 5 pages a day. The 5 pages a day are coming from an outline. I do an outline of every single thing I write. I do the outline. I do the outline because I want to know where my story is going. When I first began to write longer pieces, I would write 50 to 55 pages and then I would be stuck. 50 pages, 55 pages, then scratch. 55 pages. I couldn't get, once in a while I could get to 70 pages. But then I did not know where I was going. Because my stories had to have this drama to them. I always began on a rainy night in the city. A guy gets off the bus. He goes outside. The neon lights are flashing off the wet sidewalks. Just, a lonely pigeon walks past. And I'm saying, this is okay. This is okay. But I'm not making any money on this. I'm not finishing books. And so I came across the book, which was so interesting, by accident. It was screenplays broken down by scenes. The Godfather has about 300 and some scenes in it. Wuthering Heights has 87 scenes. Broken down by scenes, different screenplays, and they broke them down by scenes. So I began reading these scenes, and I said, aha! If I could write the scenes down, I could finish a book. So what I began doing is I began writing the scenes for every single book I wanted to write. And I would write 30 scenes. Why 30? 30 times 5 is 150. 30 times 6 is 180, what have you. But 30 scenes adds up to a book. The next thing I do is to find my characters. Now I have a general idea of who my characters are, but then I go looking for pictures of my characters. Here's the book I'm working on now. Some of the characters are familiar because I cut them from magazines. This guy began as a star of the book. He's from Tokyo Hotel, a rock group. This is another of my characters. This is Drago, a guy from the inner city Chicago who is in contrast to these people. May, who was a lovely character at the beginning of the book, has turned into a real crappy. She is crap. I hate her. So much. Him I dropped. This guy I dropped. This is the bad guy. Here's the bad guy from North Africa. This girl, who was a math major in school, took over the book. She took over the book. These pictures are this large. They go on the wall behind my computer. So when I come downstairs, feed you know who, no, sit down to do my 5 pages, my characters are looking down at me. They're looking down at me. And after a while, I know these characters so well. I'll come running downstairs and I'll say to my wife, guess what May said today? No. And my wife, who knows what I think of May, what did that woman say? I know them so well. So I have my outline, I have my characters like this. I know what day they were born on, what day they were born on, what they were going through at the age of 4. Because the age of 4 is your first memories. You may be influenced by stuff prior to 4, but before you begin to remember it. And so I do my 5 pages in the morning. I begin at 5 o'clock. By 9 o'clock, my day is finished. This is a tough life, right? In the afternoon, I may be working on the outline of a new book. At night, if my wife hasn't beaten me up too badly, I may be just thinking about projects that I might want to do. What do I want to do? How do I want my life to go? I've published 106 books. I have 3 which will be published this year. I have contracts for 10 more. I should live so long, right? There you go. But it all started because some woman in Harlem with this much education gave me the gift of reading. When my speech was not intelligible, I could retreat to the world of books. I found friends in books that sustained me. When I read Huck Finn, I went down the river with Huck and Jim. I went down that river. When I read the portrait of the artist as a young man, and Stephen Dedalus went down, it was O'Connell Street, I was right next to him. When I read the story of David and Goliath, many of you don't know this, but if David had been killed, I was his backup. I lived these characters. I used to go to the library and I would take the books, I would take a brown paper bag, put the books in the brown paper bag so I wouldn't have to fight kids who would call me a faggot, or he's reading a book. Oh. I'd fight them, but I didn't want my books messed up. I've been suspended from school numerous times. I've been in gangs. So when I published my first book, not my first book. My first book is published under my name, which is Walter Milton Myers. Because my parents never officially adopted me. The second book, I changed my name to Dean, Walter Dean Myers. This is what I do. Sometimes I'm a little bit embarrassed by this. I'm a little bit embarrassed to say that in my family, I have a brother that makes $50,000 a year. I don't want to tell him I make what I make. No. It's embarrassing. I don't want to try to impress my father though. I said, couldn't read or write. It's a sad story, really. The most painful thing in my life was when my father was dying. He was a ex-Navy man, fought in World War II. He was dying, and I had never really bonded with this man. He supported me. He bought me my first typewriter. He gave me love, but he never, ever in his life said to me, I like what you're doing. I didn't know he could not read or write. When he was dying in the hospital, I went to the hospital and I brought him the book, which I knew would be the last book of his lifetime from me. And I looked at it and he put it down. I was so crushed. And after he passed away, I went to the house and went through his papers and saw he was signing with an X. The man couldn't read or write, and he had me completely fooled. Completely fooled. You know. So, I tried to impress my dad. I remember I got a book contract. My father never made more than $10,000 during his lifetime. I remember getting a contract with something like $50,000 for a book. I showed it to my father, and he said, well, you work a little harder, maybe you'll make more. Thanks, Dad. Thank you. So this is what I do. You know, right now, I'm finishing this book with these characters, which I should have finished by the end of August. I have another book on that I'm working on the Second Italian-Ethiopian War, 1935. And the focus of that book is that when Haile Selassie, the young emperor at that point, understood that the Italians were going to invade Ethiopia, he could buy a few airplanes, he had no one to fly them. And so he sent his emissaries to America, where he understood that there were black pilots. And so these black pilots, and so I'm taking it from the point of view of the black pilots. And those days it was Hubert Julian, John Robinson. This is after Bessie Coleman. There were like a dozen pilots. And I think that's going to be an interesting book for boys. And then the last book I'm working on is a book which I hope to have finished by the end of December. It's a book for teenagers who are discouraged, who are completely discouraged and who have given up. And when I go to places, I see this more and more. The kids are simply discouraged. They stop trying. I think I can talk to them with some very kind of heavy psychological stuff, which I can break down into their language. So this is what I do.